William Parker stared at the brown envelope on his car's passenger seat. Rain hit the windows hard as he sat there alone. Inside the envelope were 3 DNA test results. Each one told him the same thing: Oliver, Henry, and Jack were not his biological sons. These were the boys he had loved for years. Oliver was now 17, a tall teenager who played football and got good grades. Henry was 14, quiet but clever, always reading books about science. Little Jack was just 8, full of energy and always asking questions about everything. William had taught them all to ride bikes. He had bandaged their cuts and bruises. He had stayed up late helping with homework. He had cheered at their school plays and sports matches. Every memory of their lives together now felt different. 20 years he had been married to Emma. 20 years of what he thought was a happy life together. Now he felt like everything was built on lies. His hands shook as he held the steering wheel tightly. He had suspected something was wrong when Jack needed a blood test last month. The doctor had said something about blood types that didn't make sense. That's when the doubt began to grow in William's mind. He hadn't wanted to believe it at first. He had made excuses, told himself he was being silly. But the thought wouldn't go away. Finally, while Emma was visiting her sister last weekend, he had collected hair samples from his son's brushes and sent them for testing. The results had arrived today. All 3 tests showed the same thing. The boys who called him Dad were not related to him by blood. William felt empty inside. He felt angry, sad, and confused all at once. What should he do now? Should he confront Emma? Should he tell the boys? Should he just leave? No, he couldn't leave. Whatever Emma had done, the boys were innocent. They still thought of him as their father. He was the one who had been there for every important moment in their lives. The rain got heavier. William watched it run down the windshield in little rivers. His mind was racing with difficult questions. Who was the real father? Had it been the same man each time? Did Emma still see him? Did anyone else know about this? William had always been proud of his family. He had thought they were perfect. Now he felt like a fool. All those times people said Oliver had his grandfather's eyes or Jack had his smile, all lies. Or at least, all mistakes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message from Oliver: "Dad, dinner's ready." "Where are you?" William didn't know what to say. He couldn't just go in and act like everything was normal. But he couldn't tell the truth yet either. Not until he had talked to Emma. Another text came through: "Dad? Mom's getting worried." William took a deep breath. He had to go inside. He put the envelope in his jacket pocket and opened the car door. The rain soaked him immediately as he walked the short distance to the front door of their small house. Before he could use his key, the door opened. Oliver stood there, looking concerned. "Dad? Why are you sitting out here in the rain?" William looked up at his oldest son. Oliver was nearly a man now. He had William's height and build. People often said how similar they looked. But now William knew that was just coincidence. "Sorry, I was thinking about some work stuff," William lied. "Lost track of time." Oliver nodded but didn't look convinced. "Well, come in. You're soaking wet." William stepped inside the warm house. The smell of Emma's shepherd's pie filled the air. He could hear Henry and Jack arguing about something in the living room. Normal family sounds. But nothing felt normal anymore. William hung up his wet coat, careful to move the envelope to his trouser pocket first. He would have to face Emma tonight, after the boys were in bed. He would have to hear the truth from her. For now, though, he had to pretend. He had to sit at the dinner table with his family and act like his world hadn't just fallen apart. He had to smile and ask about their day and help Jack cut his food. Because despite what the test said, these were still his sons. And what he decided to do next would change all their lives forever. That night, after the boys went to bed, William sat at the kitchen table waiting for Emma. His hands were folded in front of him, the envelope placed between them. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Emma entered the kitchen wearing her blue dressing gown, her hair still damp from the shower. "William? What's wrong? You've barely said a word all evening," she said, pulling out a chair. William pushed the envelope toward her without speaking. Emma looked confused as she opened it. He watched her face change as she realized what she was looking at. First surprise, then fear, and finally a deep sadness spread across her features. "How long have you known?" William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "William, please. How long?" The words came out sharper than he intended. Emma's shoulders dropped. She suddenly looked much older than her 42 years. "Since before Oliver was born," she admitted. "I wanted to tell you, but then you were so happy when he arrived, and I couldn't." William closed his eyes, remembering the overwhelming joy he'd felt holding Oliver for the first time. The same joy he'd experienced with Henry and Jack. The pride that had filled his chest when the nurse handed him each small, wrapped bundle. "Who?" he finally asked, needing to know but dreading the answer. "It doesn't matter," Emma whispered. "They've never been part of the boys' lives. You are their father, William. In every way that counts." "It matters to me," William said, his voice cracking. 20 years, Emma. 20 years of marriage. Was any of it real?" Emma reached across the table, but William pulled his hands away. Tears filled her eyes. "All of it was real," she insisted. "I've loved you every day since we met. But I made mistakes before we were married. And after. I was lonely when you worked those long hours at the start of your career." "Lonely?" William repeated in disbelief. "That's your excuse?" "It's not an excuse," Emma said. "There is no excuse. Just the truth of what happened." "Tell me who," William demanded. "I deserve to know." Emma wiped her eyes. "Different men. Not people you know. No one who lives nearby anymore." William felt sick. Not just one affair, but multiple. Not just one betrayal, but a pattern. Did they know? About the boys? Emma shook her head. "No. I never told them. They weren't interested in being fathers. Unlike me," William said bitterly. "The perfect fool who raised another man's children without questioning it." "William, you are their father," Emma insisted. "Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. And no one has loved those boys more than you have." William stood up suddenly, needing to move. The kitchen felt too small, too confined. The walls of the home he had bought and paid for now felt like they were closing in on him. "I need some time," he said, grabbing his car keys from the counter. "Where are you going?" Emma asked, panic in her voice. "I don't know. Just away. I need to think." "Please don't leave," Emma begged, standing up. "The boys will be devastated if you're not here in the morning." William paused at the door. "I'll be back before they wake up," he promised. "But I can't stay here right now. Not with you." As he left the house, William heard Emma begin to cry. Part of him wanted to comfort her, the habit of 20 years hard to break. But a larger part felt numb with shock and betrayal. He climbed into his car and drove away from the quiet street where they lived. He had no destination in mind, just a need to be alone with his thoughts. As he drove through the dark streets of their small town, memories flooded his mind. Oliver taking his first steps, reaching for William's outstretched hands. Henry proudly showing him full marks on a science test. Jack falling asleep on his chest while William read him bedtime stories. Were those moments less real now? Less meaningful? The boys hadn't changed. They were still the same children he had raised and loved. But something fundamental had shifted in William's understanding of his life. He pulled into an empty car park overlooking the river that ran through their town. The water was black in the darkness, reflecting the few lights from the bridge. William turned off the engine and sat in silence, wondering what he should do next. The life he thought he had was gone. But what would take its place? William drove aimlessly through the night, his mind filled with memories of his boys. He remembered Oliver at age 5, determined to learn to ride his bike without training wheels. William had run alongside him, holding the seat until Oliver shouted, "Let go, Dad." And when he did, Oliver had pedaled away on his own, looking back with a smile that lit up his whole face. He thought of Henry, always the quiet one, sitting next to William on the sofa with his first book, sounding out the words carefully. The pride in Henry's eyes when he finished the whole story by himself had made William's heart swell. And Jack, his youngest, who last Christmas had saved his pocket money for weeks to buy William a mug that said "World's Best Dad." Jack had wrapped it himself in newspaper and too much tape, presenting it with such excitement that William had to fight back tears. These weren't just memories, they were the fabric of his life. The thought of losing them made his chest ache. William's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled over to check it. 3 messages, one from each son. From Oliver, "Dad, are you okay? Please come home." From Henry, "Dad, whatever happened with Mom, we need you here." From Jack, "Daddy, I'm scared. When are you coming back?" William's hands shook as he held the phone. Even now, in their worry, they were thinking of him. They were reaching out to him. Not to some stranger who shared their blood, but to him, the father who had been there every day of their lives. He drove to the old park at the top of Hill Road. From there, he could see the whole town spread out below him. The streetlights made patterns in the darkness, and in the distance, he could just make out their street. Their home. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming. William got out of the car and walked to the viewpoint. The cold morning air cleared his head. As he stood there watching the sunrise, casting golden light across the town where his family lived, William began to see things differently. DNA might determine eye color or height or the shape of a nose, but it didn't determine love. It didn't create the bond that had grown between him and his boys over years of daily care and attention. What made a father? Was it a biological accident? Or was it the choice to show up every day, to teach and guide in love without condition? William thought about his own father, a distant man who had contributed DNA but little else. They rarely spoke now. Then he thought about his grandfather, who had taught him to fish, to change a tire, to be honest and kind. His grandfather had shaped him more than his father ever had. In the growing light of the new day, William realized that fatherhood had never been about DNA. It was about love. About choices. About being there, day after day, through both good times and bad. He was angry with Emma, yes. Her betrayal cut deep. But the boys Oliver, Henry, and Jack, they had done nothing wrong. They were innocent in all this. And they needed their father. William took a deep breath of the morning air and made his decision. He was their father. Not because of blood, but because of love. Because of thousands of small moments strung together over years. Because they had shaped his heart as much as he had shaped theirs. He got back in his car and headed home. As he drove through the awakening town, William thought about what he would say to the boys. They deserved the truth, but delivered with care. They needed to know that nothing had changed in his love for them. When William pulled into the driveway, he saw all 3 boys looking out the front window. They rushed outside as he got out of the car. "Dad!" Jack cried, running to him first and throwing his arms around William's waist. Henry came next, trying to look cool but unable to hide his relief. "You came back," he said simply. Oliver hung back, his face serious. At 17, he was old enough to guess that something serious had happened between his parents. "Is everything okay?" he asked. William looked at his sons, because that's what they were, his sons, and nodded. "Everything will be okay," he said, and for the first time since opening that envelope, he believed it. "I need to talk to all of you," he said, putting an arm around Jack's shoulders. "But first, I think we could all use some breakfast." As they walked into the house together, William knew the conversation ahead would be difficult. But he also knew what really mattered now. And he was ready to choose his family. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table when they walked in. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept. She stood up quickly when she saw William with the boys. "I'll make breakfast," she said quietly. "We'll all help," William replied. He wasn't ready to forgive her yet, but they needed to present a united front for the boys. They worked together in silence. William made toast, Oliver scrambled eggs, Henry set the table, and Jack poured orange juice. Emma cooked bacon, her hands trembling slightly. Once they were all seated with full plates in front of them, William took a deep breath. "Boys, your mother and I have something important to tell you," he began. Emma looked up in surprise. She hadn't expected him to include her in this conversation. Oliver put down his fork. "Are you getting a divorce?" he asked bluntly. "No," William said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "This is about something else." He looked at each of his sons. Jack was pushing his eggs around his plate, looking worried. Henry was watching William carefully, his clever eyes missing nothing. Oliver sat straight, bracing himself for bad news. "I recently learned something that was a shock to me," William continued. "I found out that biologically, I'm not your birth father." The kitchen went completely silent. Jack's fork clattered onto his plate. "What does that mean?" Jack asked, his small voice uncertain. "It means that while I'm your dad in every way that matters, I've raised you, loved you, and cared for you your whole lives, the DNA that makes up your bodies didn't come from me." Oliver's face had gone pale. "So you're not our real father?" "I am your real father," William said firmly. "Being a father isn't just about biology. It's about being there every day. It's about loving you and teaching you and supporting you. And I have always been your father in those ways." Henry, always thoughtful, asked, "Then who is our biological father?" Emma spoke up, her voice shaky. "Different men from my past. No one who has ever been part of your lives. No one who even knows about you." "So they don't want us?" Henry asked. "They never knew about you," Emma explained. "The choices I made were mine alone. And those choices are between your father and me to work through." William reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 envelopes, not the DNA test results, but new ones he had prepared during his early morning visit to the all-night print shop on Main Street. "I want you to understand something," he said, looking each boy in the eyes. "Being your father is the greatest gift of my life. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever change that." He handed each boy an envelope. "These are adoption papers. I want to legally adopt each of you, to make official what has always been true in my heart." "But Dad," Oliver said, confusion crossing his face as he looked at the papers, "we already have your last name." "This is different," William explained. "This is me choosing you, knowing everything I know now. This is me saying that biology doesn't matter, you are my sons." Jack's eyes filled with tears. "So you're still our dad?" William moved around the table and knelt beside Jack's chair. "I will always be your dad. Nothing can ever change that." Jack threw his arms around William's neck, holding on tight. Henry joined the hug next, then Oliver, who had tears in his eyes despite trying to look tough. Emma watched from across the table, her own tears falling silently. When the boys finally let go, William stood up. "I know this is a lot to take in. You might have questions, and that's okay. You can ask me or your mother anything, anytime." "Do we have to tell people?" Henry asked. "No," William assured him. "This is our family's private business." "Are you and Mom going to be okay?" Oliver asked, looking between his parents. William met Emma's eyes across the table. There was a lot of hurt to work through, a lot of trust to rebuild. He wasn't sure what the future held for their marriage. "Your mother and I have some things to work on," he said honestly. "But we both love you more than anything in the world. That will never change." As the boys finished their breakfast, William noticed a weight had lifted. The truth was out now. There would be difficult times ahead, but they would face them together, as a family. Later, as he helped Jack build a model airplane in the living room, William realized that his decision had never really been a decision at all. These were his sons. They always had been, and they always would be. 1 year later, William stood in the courthouse hallway, straightening Oliver's tie. The teenager fidgeted uncomfortably in his formal clothes but smiled at his father. "Ready?" William asked. "Ready," Oliver confirmed. They walked into the courtroom where Henry and Jack were already waiting with Emma. All three boys wore matching blue suits. Today was special. Today, the adoption would become legal. The past year had not been easy. There had been hard conversations, tears, and anger. William and Emma had spent 6 months in marriage counseling, working through the pain of her betrayal. There were nights when William wasn't sure their marriage would survive. But slowly, with honesty and effort from both sides, they had begun to rebuild trust. For the boys, there had been questions and confusion. Oliver had gone through a phase of anger, slamming doors and staying out late. Henry had become quieter than usual, burying himself in books. Jack had started having nightmares, afraid that William might leave. But William had remained steady through it all. He never missed a football game or a parents' evening. He helped with homework and cooked Sunday dinners. He was there every day, proving through actions that his love was unchanged. "All rise," the court clerk announced as the judge entered. Judge Mary Thompson smiled as she looked over the papers on her desk. She had handled many family cases, but this one touched her heart. "The Parker family," she said warmly. "I've reviewed your application for adoption. It's an unusual case, as you've been these young men's father on their birth certificates since the beginning." William nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. But I wanted to make it official again, now that we all know the truth." The judge looked at each boy. Oliver, Henry, and Jack Parker. "Do you understand what's happening today?" Oliver, as the oldest, spoke first. "Yes, Your Honor. Our dad is choosing to be our dad, even though he doesn't have to be." The judge smiled. "That's a good way to put it." She turned to William. "And Mr. Parker, you understand that legally, these adoptions change nothing about your rights or responsibilities. You've always been their legal father." "I understand," William said. "This is about something more important than legal rights. This is about choice." Judge Thompson nodded and signed the papers with a flourish. "Then by the power vested in me, I confirm these adoptions." "Congratulations," she said with a smile. "Though from what I can tell, you've been a father to these young men their entire lives." William nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat as his sons embraced him. That evening, they held a small celebration in their garden. The summer air was warm, and the smell of barbecue filled the space. Friends and family had come to celebrate with them, though most didn't know the full story. They simply thought it was a summer party. As William flipped burgers on the grill, he watched his family with quiet pride. Emma was laughing with her sister by the drinks table. Jack was playing catch with his cousins. Henry was showing his science project to William's parents. And Oliver was helping set up the food table, now taller than William by an inch. They were healing. All of them. Oliver approached William with a small wrapped package. Henry and Jack stood beside him, looking excited. "We wanted to give you this," Oliver said, handing it over. "From all of us." William unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph of the four of them, taken on a camping trip 3 years before. They were standing by a lake, arms around each other, smiling widely. Engraved on the wooden frame were the words, "Blood makes relatives. Love makes family." William stared at the gift, overcome with emotion. "Do you like it?" Jack asked anxiously. William pulled all 3 boys into a tight hug. "I love it," he said. "And I love you. All of you." Over his son's shoulders, William caught Emma's eye across the garden. She was watching them with tears in her eyes. She raised her glass slightly in a small toast. There was gratitude in her expression, and something else, hope. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the boys were in bed, William hung the framed photo in the hallway. He stood back to look at it, feeling a sense of peace. The past year had taught him that true fatherhood was never defined by blood, but by love, commitment, and the daily choice to put his children first. In choosing his sons, William had also chosen himself, the father he had always been and would continue to be. As he turned off the lights and headed upstairs, William thought about how sometimes the hardest challenges bring the greatest clarity. His family wasn't perfect. They had their scars. But they were real, and they were his, and they were worth fighting for. And that, he decided, was the greatest gift of all.